can never tell if it's focused or not. I finished this. It was very good. I kind of feel dumb doing like a spoiler-free section of this review video because it's Narnia. You should read it. Read it yourself. Read it to your children. It's good. I liked this book. 5 stars.
I need to stop saying generic things like I liked it. Of course I liked it.
Let's just jump straight into the discussion. I was kind of scared that I was not going to like this one as much as The Magician's Nephew because I watched the movie as a kid and I never really particularly enjoyed the movie. It was not my favorite, but I think that's because the movie like dramatized a lot of things, like healing Edmund. I also knew there was going to be a big battle scene in this book, and I don't really like big battle scenes, but because of the way that the book was actually written, like the movie was very dramatic and serious, but the way this book is written, it's very simple and fun and whimsical, so that definitely helped me enjoy it more. The intense and upsetting parts weren't that intense and upsetting. There's several things that this book I think helped me realize I just don't really enjoy. I don't think I enjoy books about overthrowing the government, like an evil queen that we have to take down, corrupt governments, and a small group of people taking them down. I don't think I like that trope. I think I've always known that, but I think this book has really helped me solidify that opinion. I also think I don't like snowy books, or books set in like snowy settings. I already knew that I didn't like desert settings. Something about it is weird. It's like, it's too bland in my mind to imagine. I don't know what it is exactly, but I don't like books that are set in deserts typically, and I'm thinking that maybe that applies to snow as well. I feel like I really started enjoying this book once spring happened. So I'm thinking that I probably don't like books that are set in snowy settings. That might need more experimentation. So this book didn't really have a lot going for it for me personally. I don't like big epic battle scenes. I don't like overthrowing government or evil government. I don't like snow. This book was a very slow start for me. I don't know if it's just because I've heard the beginning of this story so many times. I didn't remember most of the middle and ending, but the beginning of this story is very ingrained in my head. Lucy going through the wardrobe, Edmund going through the wardrobe, Edmund finding the witch, them all getting into the wardrobe. So I did enjoy that, but it's very familiar. And then after they all got into Narnia, it was still kind of slow. I think, again, maybe just because it was a wintry setting, but I also think like the part where they were meeting the beavers and staying with the beavers and the beavers explaining everything to them and then them traveling, I just didn't really enjoy that part as much as the rest of the book. I really think that when Edmund and the witch and the dwarf were going and saw that it was turning to spring, I think that's when I really started to really enjoy this book. I very much liked Aslan as a like god analogy character. I really appreciate, in addition to being like kind and loving, he was also very much described as fierce and terrifying, because I feel like those are attributes of God that people like don't talk about or don't like to talk about or think about or anything, but is also true. He loves you, but he will also send you to hell to be tormented forever. I very much enjoyed the part where he took the execution for Edmund. I think that helped solidify the like actual crucifixion story in my mind some. I think just having this with like more emotions and characters and a specific character involved in it, especially since C.S. Lewis did a very good job of making Edmund. Edmund at the beginning of this book was not like a lovable jerk or a goofy jerk or like the kind of villain that you root for. He was just like a flat out jerk, and you didn't like him and you didn't care about him, and he was just very annoying. And I think that made that part of the story a lot more powerful because Edmund was such a just not great person in any way. I do wish that we'd had like a bit more view into his head when he like switched over, because that was all very, very vague. And like we got to be in Edmund's head a lot when he was like evil-ish, but we didn't really get to see in his head at all after he turned to the good side, and I find that very annoying. I really like C.S. Lewis's writing in this book. As an author, I really liked it because it was very simple, it was very straightforward. The parts where they were planning the battle and he was like, centaurs go so and so, and tree spirits go somewhere over there during that certain situation or something. And it was very like non-specific, and he wasn't worried about getting like the actual details of the battle. He was just like telling the story he was telling and not worrying so much about those details. And as a writer, I really enjoyed that because sometimes you can stress too much over those little details. And they add to the story, yes, but like you also want to know like your audience and the story that you are telling. And I think that for this book that worked. And it's very encouraging. This book as a portal fantasy is really interesting to me because of all the portal fantasies that I've read, usually the kid falls into the world and then they come back a few weeks at most later. But in this one, they spend a whole lifetime in Narnia. Like, they grew up there as kings and queens and even almost forgot about the real life world. I don't know what it's called, this world, and just managed to stumble back into it one day. And I think that's a really interesting thing to think about because, like, you know, when people say that thing where it's like, what if you woke up tomorrow and realized your whole life was just a dream? That's basically what happened to them. And like most of us would usually say that that would be a nightmare, that we wouldn't want that to happen. And like that's what happened to them. They grew up, they were kings and queens, they went through puberty, they fought battles and wars and had people wanting to marry them. They lived a whole life, had whole experience. That life experience was the royalty in Narnia experience. And then one day while out on hunt, they just stepped through some trees, fell through a door, and then they basically went back in time because they were kids again. It was the same time in the same world, and they were just suddenly kids again. And now they have to go forward doing this world school and work and people and interacting. I just think that's a very interesting thing to think about. As a summary, I enjoyed this book. I was pleasantly surprised that I didn't dislike the parts I was scared I was going to dislike. I think this story is a very good story as like an allegory for Christ and everything, because not only does it do a very good job of portraying that story in a sort of new light, which makes you think about it a little bit differently, which I think is a good thing, but it's also a very good story in and of itself, which is what I think a lot of stories like that are kind of missing. They're too focused on that and they forget to just tell a original and unique good story in and of itself too. And I think that's an important part of it being an allegory. Am I using the word allegory correctly? Is that what I mean? You know what I mean. I'll look that up later. That's all we have for today. If you haven't read this, you should. Read it yourself, read it to your children, all those things. Goodbye. I kicked the thing. Goodbye.